It's not exactly a tourney-worthy deck, but if you're looking for a fun rogue just to mix up the competitive metagame, then here you are. Ghost and Bear. Let's start by talking about Dark Ursaring. Like all other Dark Pokemon, it's got low HP, the trade-off being some slightly more powerful attacks. In my underrated Neo Destiny video, I listed this as one of the most underrated cards. Let's see why. First of all, you can force your opponent to play a baby or basic Pokemon from their hand using Provoke. There's a lot of other decks that rely on strategies like this, like Dark Crobat, Callback archetype, and that can be very disruptive for your opponent. Especially when next turn you're going to be using Battle Frenzy. For only 2 energy, you're going to flip a coin for every Pokemon that is in play, and if heads, deal 20 damage to that Pokemon. You know, this is a pretty good spread attack, nothing too special. And in Neo 1, odds are your opponent's going to have at least 1 baby Pokemon in play anyway, so you might not even want to go straight to Provoke. Instead, you can just evolve into Ursaring and use Battle Frenzy on your second turn. Just start stacking that damage as quickly as possible. And of course you have Unknown In and its normal Pokemon power, which protects all of your Pokemon from up to 30 damage from any attacking normal type. So as long as you have Unknown in play, none of your Pokemon are going to take damage from Dark Ursaring. As you continue to layer on spread damage with Dark Ursaring, you'll also want to get as many Fossil Gengars, as reprinted in the Legendary Collection, onto your bench as possible. That way you can use multiple Curse powers per turn, moving around those damage counters and potentially getting those small knockouts on baby Pokemon or low HP basic Pokemon, and occasionally stepping in with a Dark Mind attack just to help with the damage spread or to cover Dark Ursaring's weakness. Now that you've got the basic core of the deck, let's get into the deck list. Because this is a rogue, you know I am not using Cleffa. Instead, we will just rely on Copycat to capitalize off of our opponent's Cleffas. Maybe. Instead, we're just going straight into our own strategy, full playset of Gastly. But this Fossil Gastly that got reprinted in Legendary Collection is a pretty amazing card to start the game with, actually. For 1 energy, you're dealing 10 damage, getting some chip damage in there, but also potentially paralyzing your opponent's active. That could be counterproductive to copycatting your opponent's Eek, but nonetheless, it's still a pretty great start to any game. Following that up, we're also going to have a full playset of Gengar. No Haunters in this deck, it slows it down a little too much, so instead, we're just going to be using that reprinted Pokemon Breeder to go straight from Gastly into Gengar. That way you can start moving damage counters as early as possible. Your Teddiursa, we don't have a whole lot of choice there, so we're just going with what's available and using this one here from Neo Discovery. So if you are starting the game with Teddiursa, hopefully you're not up against anything that's too haymakery since it only has 40 HP, but start the game with Teddiursa, lay down an energy. Next turn, evolve up into Dark Ursaring, attach another energy, start using Battle Frenzy right off the bat, stacking and layering that damage as much as possible. Try to get your opponent on the back foot, you know, if they've got baby Pokemon or Horsey or Houndours, Cyndaquils, Totodiles. If you're just firing off 20 damage here and there, even if you're just hitting half the coin flips, you can get them pretty scared with their setup once you start spreading that damage around. Now Dark Ursaring has low HP itself, so you're going to have to strategize around that, but full playset of Teddiursa, full playset of Dark Ursaring, and then 3 copies of Unknown In. Just in case 1 or 2 of them get prized, you want to be able to search that out pretty quick. Ideally, turn 2, whenever you start attacking with Dark Ursaring, it's most likely going to be turn 2 or 3. Since there is no Cleffa in this deck, you're going to be relying on your trainer draw support a lot more than usual, so a full playset of Professor Elm in here, and 3 copies of Copycat. That way you're kind of cycling through your deck a little bit, giving your hand a refresher, trying to get the exact cards you need, because you are going to be relying a lot on getting Pokemon Breeder and Gengar into your hand in order to evolve up those Gastlys. You're going to need those Unknown Ends as early as possible. Pokemon Fan Club is going to help up with that, as you can just search out the basic Pokemon. It's more of getting the Gengars, Dark Ursarings, and Breeders into your hand as quickly as possible, which Pokemon Fan Club can't really help you with. That's when you're going to need a full hand refresh with the Professor or Copycat. 4 copies of Breeder so that you've got everything you need to get at least 2 Gengar into play. That's usually about all you needed to really put the pressure on, but whew, if you can get 3 Gengar out there all moving damage counters at the same time, then that's when you start setting yourself up for multiple knockouts per turn. To help ensure that Dark Ursaring is able to keep firing off those attacks as much as possible, 4 copies of Double Gust in here. It is going to be a problem when your opponent starts playing Double Gust as well, but you know, that's just kind of one of the things you have to work around in this deck. And you want to be equipping Dark Ursaring with these gold berries so that they're healing off any damage that they're taking, because again, you want to keep firing off those attacks as much as possible. The deck doesn't really work if you're not layering on damage counters and putting pressure on your opponent. Dark Ursaring is going to get a little bit of an HP boost from Rocket's Hideout, but that only really goes into effect for as long as that stadium stays in play. So if your opponent has their own stadium that they send into play, suddenly Dark Ursaring becomes a lot more vulnerable. A couple copies of Town Volunteers just to recycle some of the psychic energy as well as some of your Pokemon. And then the aforementioned Rocket's Hideout, going to be running 3 copies of that, because if your opponent plays a counter gym, you want to be able to counter right back and add that 20 HP right back on a Dark Ursaring. Especially after turn 4 or 5, it really becomes a survival game just to get off as many frenzy attacks as you can. 4 copies of Recycle Energy just to help out those Teddiursas and Ursarings. That way if one gets knocked out, you can just get the energy back at hand, reserving the psychic energy in this deck for Gengar in case you do need to swap out. Use a Dark Mind attack just to deal a little bit more consistent damage. Or like I was saying earlier, just cover for Dark Ursaring's weakness. You're not going to run into a ton of fighting types in this format, but just in case you do have some coverage there. And then you're going to round out the deck with 10 copies of that psychic energy, just so if you do need to rely more on Gengar, you absolutely can. The deck can still function fine with maybe even just 6 copies of Psychic Energy, but I tend to get energy screwed a lot, and so I always lean a little heavier into the energy, even though there is still plenty of draw power in this deck. So, as you can see, it's a pretty simple build, pretty simple strategy, and can be pretty fun to play if your opponent doesn't know what they're up against. And right off the bat, any experienced player knows that this deck is super weak to Pichu, which really does exactly what this deck does, but faster. That's why it's going to be super important to start attacking with Dark Ursaring as early as possible. That way your opponent knows if they do play a Pichu, it's already going to be threatened by the spread damage that you're dealing, and then hopefully you can take Pichu out before it wreaks too much havoc on your Gengars and Unknowns. If you are running into frequent trouble with your opponent's Double Gust, then go ahead and throw in some copies of Balloon Berry. There's also another completely different BearGhost build that you can do with Dark Haunter and Dark Gengar, as they also work similarly, but it does slow the deck down quite a bit, because then you're going to be focusing more on Dark Gengar's pull-in attack as well as Dark Haunter's callback attack, at which point you will just be running a worse copy of a callback build, and the Dark Ursaring won't even really matter. You can search out all the evolutions much more easily when the entire deck is Dark Pokemon, because you have Boss's Way, and Dark Haunter and Dark Gengar both are going to benefit from the inclusion of Rocket's Hideout. But again, like I said, then you're really just running a Dark Gengar, Dark Haunter deck, and the Dark Ursaring is kind of third fiddle, in which case why even include it at all? This deck that I presented today focuses more on Dark Ursaring's attack, as well as the ability for that Fossil Gengar to support. That's where I find the fun in the deck. Let me know your opinions down in the comments section as always. Let me know if you've tried this deck. How did it play for you? What would you add? What changes would you make? Also, let me know if you have any request decks or just deck ideas in general, as I am getting close to the end of my Neo on block. Social media links are down in the description. I'll see you next video. Bye.